Good evening. You're watching Redwood Wonk on Access Humboldt, unless you're listening to us on 96.7 on the radio or watching us on the internet. We have a lot to talk about. Chuck Rogers is here with me as usual. My name is Eric Kirk, and we'll be talking national politics. Always a lot happening. We are in, what is it now? We're going on the third month of the Biden administration. A lot of it depends on who you are as to what your reviews are as to whether he's doing a good job. But one of the things he did was he held a press conference. Now, he is apparently went the longest of any president for over a century to have a press conference. Although he has answered questions from reporters, but to have an all-out press conference, which could last, for an hour, and it did last for over an hour. Republicans were kind of taunting him and saying that, well, he's not going to hold up over that time. They, and thought that they were hiding him because of senility and the issues that they keep pushing. Doesn't seem to have happened, and we can talk about that. It was, but one of the more interesting things about it is they went through a whole hour and no one in the media asked one question about the pandemic or the economy. And I just find that amazing. I think the media, and I'm going to have some comments about why I think it is and why I think the media is really in a bad state these days as to that, and why I don't even think these press conferences are worth a whole lot. But Chuck?
Well, a couple of things about it. One as to tone and the other as to substance. What was striking to me comparing this press conference to what we have just come out of over the last 4 years was the tone. It was not full of accusations about others, naming enemies and put downs, and it wasn't condescending. It was actually what you might expect of someone who is professional and understands the role of the presidency of the United States. So I enjoyed the fact that we kind of got back to what the tone should be in a presidential press conference. As to substance, I agree there should have been more about coronavirus. I think probably the fact that things are actually getting done, there's some progress on it, may have put it in the back of the minds of some of the reporters there. It shouldn't have been. There should have been questions about it for sure, but that may be one explanation for it. But I did like the fact that there was public policy discussed instead of just juvenile playground barbs being hurled. So that was a positive. The lack of coronavirus notwithstanding, lack of information on that notwithstanding, at least there was substance on public policy. And the other thing is that with regard to public policy, he seemed to not be afraid to just be honest with the American people. Here's what we need to do and here's why. He wasn't trying to sugarcoat things the way the previous guy did. He seemed to be more upfront with the reporters and the American people. So that's my take. How about you?
Well, I agree. I mean, it is a much more substantial one. He didn't tangle with the reporters so much. He did get a little annoyed when there was a second question about whether he's going to run in 2024, which is basically aimed at, you're old. Are you going to be a one-termer? They asked him, will you have Kamala Harris as your running mate? And okay, ask it once. It's kind of, in my opinion, a stupid question to be asking 2 months into his presidency, but that's, that is the media, and part of the problem with the media these days. And yes, there was some good policy. There was discussion about the filibuster. There was a lot of questions about the immigration situation at the border, and the rest. But there ought to have been questions about the pandemic. We're still in it. right? We're possibly having a fourth wave right now. The infections went up a week ago, as we learned just before the show. We've got a major setback in that Johnson and Johnson somehow managed to contaminate 15 million doses. That's going to slow plans back a lot. We're supposed to be getting your age and my age, I believe, are qualify as of tomorrow to be able to get it. But I don't know if they have the doses locally for us or not. It's hard to get any information, honestly. I mean, I've been trying to contact Open Door, and they just keep saying we don't know. I mean, it's just but people are getting them. We've apparently vaccinated over 50,000 locally, which is over a third, and that's pretty good. But this is the issue. We are still in an we still have an economic issue with the pandemic, and we still have to to get policy out there. We still got to convince I mean, it would have been an opportunity for President Biden to discuss with the governors who are opening states up, particularly in Florida, where there is now a variant, the British variant that is not only more spreadable but more deadly, spreading like crazy, partly because of DeSantis's lax attitude towards it. So. Right. I like I said, it was good. I have no criticisms of Biden, really. I mean, he dodged like any president would, and questions he didn't want to answer, and changed them. But I was really disappointed in the media, and I think part of the problem is you've got too many people in the White House press corps who, for whatever reason, want to get themselves on that 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock news by asking the tough question. And the one that made it on was whether or not Biden was going to run in 2024, something almost nobody outside the Beltway cares about right now. It's just anyway. So I'm disappointed in the media. In the White House press corps anyway. And, Biden, he did fine. All the claims that he was going to mess up and space out and the rest seemed to go under. The right-wing noise machine had was gearing up for it to look for mistakes that they made, and they even kind of said, "Oh yeah, boy, that was a disaster." I was like, I don't know how it was a disaster. Can you point to any specifics? And they can't really. So he did what he needed to do. He should probably hold them more often, but I don't have a whole lot of. I don't think those press conferences really mean a whole lot in terms of informing the public. I think it's the daily press briefings you're more likely to get it because they're a little bit it's a little bit more routine, it's policy oriented, and people not trying to get themselves on the 6 o'clock and 11 o'clock news.
Yeah, I think the White House press briefings, the daily briefings, I think are where you're going to find most of the nuts and bolts about public policy and exactly what's going on and exactly what's on the president and the vice president's to-do list for the next day and the next week, and where things stand on different issues and what's being done and what's not being done. You're right. I think the daily briefing, Jen Psaki is the one who does that, I think are much more informative. Anytime there's a politician up there, there's going to be politics at play. And so I agree.
Right. Hey, and real quickly, the issue with the media is it gives Biden the opportunity, same kind of opportunity every president gets, to say, well, I wanted to talk about what the American people care about. It gives them an opportunity to do that, because no matter what, it's a slightly adversarial position. I'm sure the reporters are relieved he's there instead of his predecessor, but I thought it was ridiculous that there was not one question about the pandemic, not one question about the economy, when those are the two things that are on people's minds. Not that these other topics aren't important, but it's almost like they're moved on, but other people haven't. Maybe they got their shots. Who knows?
Well, just to follow up on that, one thing that people who work with politicians and try to train a politician who maybe is fairly new or hasn't had a lot of exposure to the media in the past. Of course, Joe Biden should know this. I don't know why, but why he didn't. But one thing that they're often told is, no matter what the question is, have some points that you want to make.
Mhm.
and make sure that you handle the question that you're asked, but make sure you get to the points that you want to make.
Yeah.
And so that's, maybe he should have been a little more aggressive with that.
I don't know. I think he probably just wanted the opportunity to go and say, see, they're not talking
Yeah.
about what the American people want. And that puts them on the defensive the next time.
Well,
All
and,
right.
and to prove to people that he can get through it, because he's still dealing, especially from the right, with criticism about his age.
Right.
So, yeah.
All right, we've got this infrastructure bill, 2.5 trillion proposed. Some progressives are saying that's not enough. They wanted over 3 trillion. It's not to be spent all at once. It's to be phased over a number of years. But some people will say it's aggressive. Some progressives are saying it's not aggressive enough. I don't know if they're just trying to frame it so that they don't lose what's in there. But Ocasio-Cortez, for instance, said that it needs to go further on green technology, on reviving inner cities, and converting the technology to the way of the future. Republicans are, of course, saying this isn't about roads and bridges. Of course, infrastructure is never just about roads and bridges, but that's exactly what they're talking about. A lot in it, a lot of money, we have I forget what the modern economist theory is, but right now, while there isn't inflation, there are some economists who say, spend it now. If we get into hyperinflation, that would be actually a decent problem for us to have to deal with, and we can deal with it by pulling back. But they talk about right now we have a partnership between the fiscal authority and the monetary authority. They're both trying to stimulate an economy. And of course, the resistance is the Republican Party. It appears, even though there was a conversation between Biden and McConnell about it, that McConnell is not going to support an infrastructure bill that isn't deficit neutral. In other words, anything we spend is going to have to come from somewhere else. That's a rule under Obama. Biden's saying no way. They're going to push for reconciliation again, probably, but it's a tough slog because you got to get the people like Sienna and Manchin on board, and they've already shown that they're willing to block the Democratic Party agenda. So I don't know, exactly what's happening there. I don't know that we have a lot of parts of the bill, but this is about economic recovery. But it's also about retooling and revitalizing the power grid, and a lot of other agenda items. It seems like it's ambitious. Maybe progressives really do want more, or maybe they're just trying to frame the argument so that they don't let people like Manchin cut into it. Joke about that ship that's in the canal. They said it's blocking so much important stuff. They should rename it the SS McConnell. I mean, so there really is going to be that. So they really do need to get Manchin and Sienna on board. Tester and the others as well. Yeah. What do you say?
Well, I thought it was interesting. One of the things that I wrote down was that Biden said, I want to change the paradigm, which is interesting. I thought it was specifically, though, interesting for Joe Biden, because let's remember who Joe Biden is. I mean, going all the way back in his political career, he's kind of the accommodator. He's the one who's been known for being able to broker deals across the aisle, and he's kind of everybody's friend in any legislative situation. With this, though, saying he wants to change the paradigm, that speaks to big ambition. It also speaks to the fact that somebody got to him, and all of his advisors, I'm assuming, probably even during the campaign, and said, we're in new and different times now.
Yes.
So when you have the power in the Senate, especially, but when you have both houses of Congress and you have the White House, it's time to do bold stuff. So I think that's his thinking right now, and I'm glad because that's the correct assessment of the times in which we find ourselves. So a multi-trillion-dollar ambitious program like this, I'm all for it. And as far as the expense goes, raising revenue and spending money when there are specific needs in a giant society like this, I think is a good thing. In fact, we've been avoiding propping up the infrastructure in this country for at least 20 years. And we've been listening to architects and engineers telling us with every one of their reports over the last 20 to 30 years that we've got to do this or we're going to run into problems. So I think this is something that was unavoidable and was needed. There are some green things in it, to be sure, like electric vehicle charging stations and, possibly putting some caps on oil and gas wells and things like that and reducing subsidies to fossil fuel companies and so on. So there are some things in there that I'm all for. I don't think, though, you could ever appease 100% of the people 100% of the time. So nobody's going to like everything in it. But I'm glad it's moving forward. We'll see what happens with it.
Well, of course, McConnell says he will not support any tax increases, and the corporate tax, the 28% increase in the corporate tax, with shutting down loopholes so that it actually is an increase in tax, is something that's on the table. Obviously, that's subject to reconciliation. You can't say that's not budget related, and so. It is another bill that is basically ripe for reconciliation, and I get the feeling like when he's saying we're in a new paradigm, I think he wants to reclaim the concept of big government not being such a bad thing, particularly when you've been in a recession. And again, he does not want to repeat the mistakes of the Obama era, where they went where they tried to get along and with the Republicans, and they didn't ask for enough, and it didn't demand enough, and so I think he wants to get this through while he's got that 2-year window where the president gets the most done, and he wants an infrastructure bill that isn't just going to fill the potholes on highways, and repair bridges. He wants it to be transformative. That's his goal. That's the legacy he's looking for, and they say the president gets more done in the first 2 than the entire 8, than the entire remaining 6 if they win 2 terms. So, I think it's going to be a real intense fight. The Republicans are just going to fight it tooth and nail. And the question is what is the Democratic leadership's strategy with regard to Manchin and Sienna?
Yeah, that's the big question, huh? And that's going to be the big question going forward on every single issue. Yeah. So, which gets us, I guess, to the filibuster, and so on. Something's got to be done about that. But with regard to the bill itself, there's also some plans in there to modernize the electric grid, which I think is long overdue, especially with what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years or so with problems there. And as far as raising money on it, there's been talk of Biden wanting to, and not being bashful about saying that he wants to raise taxes on the wealthiest Americans. And what I've read is that the thought there is that above $400,000 per year in income be where the increases would go. And there's been some recent polling on there. Politico and Harvard did a recent poll on it. 73% of Americans favor that. 73%. So with numbers like that, maybe that's where he's getting some of the courage to just move forward with it and force the Republicans to take a stand against it.
And this is the thing. Nobody has anything to worry about with the proposal, because if you're earning under $400,000 a year, you got nothing to worry about because your taxes will be unaffected. If you're earning over $400,000 a year, you got nothing to worry about because you earn effing over $400,000 a year. So, so stop whining. I mean, the system is set up for you to be able to earn this much. So, pay for it. You're the one that benefits the most for it. You pay for what we need to do in this. It's all of government is about protection of wealth. When you get to the core of the purpose of government, it really is about the protection of surplus wealth. Going back 10,000 years from the earliest civilizations, that's what you had. Before that, you didn't have surplus wealth, so there was nothing there. You needed a system to protect surplus wealth. So everything, the taxation, the infrastructure, even what you give to the poor, that's all about releasing pressure valves to prevent revolution, to protect your wealth. So just suck it up and be ready to pay what you paid for in the 50s when the glorious golden age you all want to go back to.
Yeah, I agree. And you know what, when you look at numbers like 73% favorability, that's something you should pay attention to. But what that speaks to is that there are a lot of Republicans out there who approve of exactly what we've been saying. The question is why they don't vote in that direction. And that gets us to the wins and losses and the us versus them and party before country and so on. And until we fix this societal problem, we can't really look with a lot of confidence at 73%, but we can look at 73% favorability and wonder when it's going to be that Republicans finally say, okay, we need to do this.
I, Richard Billhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear.
I, Gerald R. Ford, do solemnly swear.
I, Jimmy Carter, do solemnly swear.
I, Ronald Reagan, do solemnly swear.
I, George Herbert Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, George Walker Bush, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear. So help me God.
Okay, the topic at hand has become national because we all have seen the videos. We've heard horror stories, and even on the small scale of anti-Asian violence. Now, most of it is aimed at older people, probably because they're the most vulnerable. But we are seeing, a kid where there was a Kitty Genovese type moment where somebody was beaten up in New York City recently, and the security guard for the building refused to do anything. He shut the door. We've got an incident in San Francisco where actually the 76-year-old woman beat her attacker into submission, and there's still people on the internet who think she was too rough with him. Right? I mean, it was just it is there, and we have the shooting, and we have that it is up, and there is no mistake about it. It's not just up on YouTube in terms of YouTube videos. Violence and bigotry against Asians in particular is reaching a crescendo. And as we've talked about before, we blame some of it on national leadership, but that didn't create the problem. It's been a problem for quite some time, and there is some proposals to try to address it at the national level. I don't know that there's any legislation that will fix that problem, right, but just passing something even symbolic so that there is a united stand against this craziness is necessary. And it's even hit home with me. Of course, my son and daughter are Asian. They're from Korea. And my daughter and her boyfriend were in a store a few months ago, a local store. And when they came into line, there was a guy who turned around and just backed off them, like, worried that they were going to be infected by him or something like that. It was really intense. And they just kind of rolled their eyes, but that's not something my 16-year-old daughter should have to put up with. No. Minor compared to some of the other things, but something that really needs to be addressed, because there is a belief out there that somehow you're more likely to get COVID from an Asian, and it's just absolutely ridiculous.
Well, let's recall the former president called it the China virus, called it the Wuhan virus, and so as to try to deflect blame from himself for not doing anything about it. And as we said, I don't know how many times on this program, words matter, especially when it's somebody who is in the seat of power that everybody is listening to. So, of course, what was said in the prior administration that lit the fire for a lot of this was disgusting and reprehensible. But here we are, and it's too bad that your daughter has had to deal with that. And I think you're right. You cannot legislate attitudes, and you can't legislate away bigotry and ignorance. If we could, it would be easy, but it isn't easy. I'm interested to know, since you brought it up, I'd like to ask you, as a parent, how do you handle that? What can you possibly say?
There's not much I can say. I mean, it's not the only time they've run into issues. We knew that we were going to have to take that up when we adopted them. They have run into things. I mean, my son ran into stuff on the soccer field. Somebody who he kept burning, called him a word that is used against Chinese, and I asked him, how do you feel about that? You can't talk to the ref, the coaches about it. He says, they say a lot of stuff out there on the field, and why should I take them seriously when they can't even get the slur right? So it's just, they're handling it. They're handling it well. Neither of them have faced violence or anything like that. That's so I'm grateful for that. But I have other stories about some things that she experienced right here in the Eureka school system, and with an administration that didn't really want to deal with it, so what I would hope is that something that might pass on the federal level, it won't mean much. It won't change any of the bases for the cultural structures around the racism, but some federal money for some type of curriculum that could get into the schools that educates about it, something along those lines. It's not like it's not going to work like magic, but it's something to consider, and it's just a statement that national leadership is taking, that we are acknowledging that this is a problem and we are with you. To the Asian community, something along those lines.
Yeah, well, that would be good. It worries me though, because let's think about just this country's history with African Americans, Native Americans, the Italians, the Irish immigrants. Remember, the pictures from your American history book when there were signs that said "No Irish need apply." So. We've always had a problem with bigotry of one sort or another, many different kinds of it, many different shades of it in this country. And I don't know how you change attitudes like that. Maybe what you're saying with curriculum in the schools is a good place to start. Let's hope. I don't have any other answers. It's ignorance and it's fear. And it's a complete misunderstanding, and it's not seeing all of us in the same boat together in this country, and that's the tragedy.
Well, I mean, and curriculum could just be about teaching the history. Now, a lot of teachers do it. A lot of schools do it. I think part of the problem with integrated in today's curriculum is there's a lot of teaching to the test. Is this going to be on the standardized test I have to take to get into college or graduate from high school?
Yeah.
Or get funding for our schools and the rest. So we need to move away from teaching to the test and going back to curriculum. When I was in school, there was a movie about Japanese internment entitled Farewell to Manzanar. It was a made-for-TV movie, but it was actually really good for a made-for-TV movie. And it should be part of the curriculum.
Yeah.
The autobiography of Malcolm X, along with other writings, should be part of a national kind of curriculum. Not curriculum that is so that every locality is identically taught, but some basic guidelines around those. But there's such resistance to it. It's seen as federal intrusion, and trying to make my kids be, subjected to political correctness and the rest. But it could be put forth in as form of grants that schools can take or not take. And they've done it in the past. I think it just needs to be revived a little bit, updated a little bit. The things I talk about are old, movies and old books, and they're important. We do need people should be reading the autobiography of Malcolm X, but there's a lot more modern materials too, and there ought to be a federal, guideline, not imposing on local districts, but saying, hey, if you'd like some funding, for this particular curriculum, you can be open to it. Unfortunately, I think that certain local districts would resist it. They would rather refuse the money than not do that. That's a whole other subject. Anyway, that's as a frustration as a parent. There are probably other things that can be done, but the biggest thing is to aim at curriculum. Multidisciplinary could be across in the way history is taught. Like I said, we've had excellent teachers, but they've quit because of teaching to the test, which a lot of people think was the sort of the right-wing backlash's way of trying to suppress and be rid of the curriculums that were developed in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And we need to return to those and have some funding to be able to return to those and have less emphasis on standardized testing, which is somebody who scores really well on standardized tests. I can tell you they're a total sham. You learn how to take the test. I scored better than on the German achievement test than a person who speaks it fluently because I knew how to take the test. It's the way my mind works. It's the way, I was taught in a college prep school how to take the test. It does not teach anything. Okay. I mean, you do have to know some of the material, but we need to move away from that anyway. And that, I mean, that's the beginning. It's with the kids and with education. But if the families aren't going to reinforce it, even curriculum is limited.
Yeah.
All right. Next topic, again, on the topic of race in this country, we keep calling it the George Floyd trial, but it actually should be referred to as the Officer Chauvin trial. He's on trial, right. Not George Floyd. Although you wouldn't guess that. I'm sure George Floyd will be on trial as the defense presents its case. But right now we're still in the prosecution phase. They've brought in a few witnesses, the people who were standing around, and I don't even know why they need the witnesses so much because what they have on video speaks for itself. But they did bring in the witnesses to talk. Defense is really going on a scorched earth, attacking the credibility of those witnesses, trying to portray this one gentleman who did in fact threaten an officer because he was freaking out about what was happening, called the officer a tough guy, and was a little bit angry, but they're trying to make him out to be an angry person. They're trying to discredit the girl who was filming the thing, and they're trying to discredit the defense has so far referenced the area as a high crime area, which upset at a mob that started to make the police nervous. The mob consisting of maybe 15 people. The defense has sort of suggested, well, they were on the other side of the street. Prosecution has apparently been very competent in showing the panoramic views of the cameras available, saying there weren't that many people across the street. There weren't that many people clustered around. Some people were going away because they're afraid of what was going to happen to them. So there really wasn't that big of a crowd. And how that pertains to the defense, I don't know, but I guess they just have to somehow undercut the emotionalism of these witnesses and what they saw. But it's almost like it doesn't really matter because we all see it. We can go to YouTube and see it every day. It's horrifying. 11 minutes that they have it on. And, online you see people saying, oh, he died from ODs. I'm sure the defense is going to try to introduce that as a possibility. But this was the police killing, one among many, of a black man who was subdued, under control, and it's what set off the whole most recent discussion in terms of Black Lives Matter protests and the reactions to it.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. I think that the benefit of all of these witnesses is the following. A lot of the jurors were selected, not all of them, but many of them were selected because they had not seen the video. And I don't know how many of them there are, but a number of them had not seen the video. So it strikes me that part of what the prosecution is doing is telling through the witnesses, the jurors, that you can believe your eyes. You can believe what you see here. And to drive that home, I thought one of the most effective witnesses along those lines was a Minneapolis EMT. Yeah. She was off duty. Of course, EMTs are fire department first responders. She was off duty at the time, happened to be in that area, saw what was going on, took a look to see what all's going on. She noticed that George Floyd was in distress and told the police officers there that she was an EMT and could help. They denied her. They told her she could not help. So she said, I'll talk you through it. You need to start compression because he's in distress. They didn't listen to her. So I think that testimony from an EMT, somebody who is trained to recognize when a person is in distress and needs help, and that's what she saw, I think that helps the jury be comfortable with saying, I can trust what I see there, and that was wrong. So I think that's what's going on there.
You know, it scares me to have learned that, you know, people were they were selected or were basically favored for the jury because they hadn't seen the video. It reminds me going way back to the trial of Holly North, where they're trying to exclude anybody who had heard about it. Well, who does that leave, right? People who live in caves. Yeah. I mean, people who are on another planet at the time, people who just aren't engaged. But I don't know. In this case, it might be a little bit different than the Ollie North trial in that there may have been people who watched it because they were told about it and just didn't want to go through it. They'd seen it before. Yeah. Right. And so that might be different. You know, we'll see how it works. I'm sure, you know, they're going to be, I mean, right now the defense is playing up with the, you know, all the scary black people that were standing around, including the EMT, you know, that will backfire with regard to the public, with regard to, you know, anybody observing it through the media. But I don't know what effect it'll have on the jury. I don't know enough about the jury. Yeah,
that's still to be determined, huh? I think going back to something you said earlier, I think you're right. The defense is going to introduce toxicology reports and talk about the fact that there were certain things in his system combined with him being maybe not in the best of health that probably contributed to this. If so, though, I still don't think that is going to exonerate the officer in the minds of the jury. It does, though, let us see the rationale for adding for the jury the third degree problem that the jury could go for if they are not sure after they hear the defense case that this rises to the level of what was it, second degree murder and manslaughter and so on. And then they added third degree to give the jury another choice. That they may have been anticipating what the defense was going to be when they did that, knowing that they could convince the jury that what the jury is seeing and hearing about is wrong and giving them a way to convict this officer.
It may very well be. I noticed that most of the national politicians are staying relatively quiet about it, even some of the goofy ones. So, you know, of course, they don't want to be on the wrong side of it, you know, yeah. But it does seem to be the case that national politicians are correctly exercising restraint during this trial. Go ahead.
Let me, as an attorney and somebody who observes politics, you're in a unique situation to be able to look at this from kind of 360 degrees around the issue. What is your sense about the impact of the verdict, either way, on Minneapolis, the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, state of Minnesota, and nationwide?
I mean, if there's a not guilty verdict or a minor verdict, it will probably start up a lot of distressed reactions again.
Yeah.
And the rest, as it usually has. If there is a conviction, and I'm going to have a prediction about the conviction later, then it could be a statement, because it's not often that police actually get prosecuted. It's not often that they even get beyond the grand jury, because quite frankly, as we've seen locally, a lot of times the prosecutor's presentation to the grand jury is at best half-hearted. And you have qualified immunity and all these other things that allow police to get off. The fact that this one's in trial, it's high profile, it's being watched on video now. Normally, cameras aren't allowed into the courtroom to be able to watch it except for very specific things. But because of the social distancing, it's available now. People can watch it themselves, and they can watch it later. It's on YouTube, very similar to what Access Humboldt does. Anyway. Anyway, I will have a prediction for you, but the impact could be vast, because it's not often that police lose fail to defend these cases.
Today, we celebrate the triumph not of a candidate, but of a cause. The cause of democracy.
We are going to raise issues that, historically have not been raised.
What about the nuclear option, doing away with the filibuster? I can tell you that would be the end of the Senate as it was originally devised.
All of this is possible for America. Who was standing in the way? Mitch McConnell.
Where an insurrection that sought to overturn an election, when that failed, the action moved into state capitals.
Well, Matt Gaetz, he's been kind of a lightning rod for a while. He's a solid Trump ally. Maybe not right now. I think the Republicans are distancing, but there is an investigation pertaining to him that involves him having brought a 17-year-old girl, had her accompany him on trips, and took her across state lines, violation of law if it was without parental consent. And he is being investigated for the possibility that he committed statutory rape. Nobody wants to use that term. Everybody's really cautious about it, but he's not finding very many friends right now in the Republican Party.
No, he is not. And that's very interesting, isn't it? The other interesting part about this is that apparently this investigation began during the Trump administration, when Bill Barr was Attorney General, who had to sign off on this investigation. Could have quashed it, could have made it go away, but didn't. Right. And then interestingly enough, right after that, and this is all public records, so this is not speculation. Right after that, Bill Barr intentionally avoided various Republican events that he knew Matt Gaetz would be at, not wanting to have a picture taken with him. So Bill Barr knew something, and allowed this investigation to go forward. And we'll see where this goes. I have a feeling that since the DOJ is, I believe the statement they released said they could neither confirm nor deny that an investigation was underway. A lot of times that means an investigation is underway, because otherwise they just say, we don't know what you're talking about. We'll see where this goes, but I think that you're spot on in saying that one of the most interesting things about this is that he's not getting any help from his from his fellow GOPers.
Well, and that crazy interview on Fox didn't help him with that. No. I mean, that was just insane. He was accusing, the former attorney who's in the DOJ of trying to shake him down, right? Of trying to blackmail him. That attorney is now has come out and said that's insane. I never did that. It was one of those cases where the interview just got more bizarre as it went along. I think the host, what's his name? I forget his name. Tucker Carlson. He gave his patented bewildered look through the whole thing. He always looks like he's in a deer in the headlights when things aren't going his way. I think he regretted having stated that. Saturday Night Live has already, having held the interview, Saturday Night Live has already made fun of him. As a little mini prediction here, SNL will have a skit about that interview this Saturday. I mean, it is just over the top ridiculous, and I don't think he definitely did not help himself. Barr obviously had no choice but to push this thing. And that suggests that the evidence is strong. His responses are strange.
Yes.
Every time he gets in front of a camera, he just digs himself deeper. It's really odd. And anyway, it's the internet is having a ball with it right now. And conservatives are really tight-lipped. I don't even see Trump coming out for him right now.
Yeah, he hasn't, which is interesting. This is yet another person in the Trump orbit who has this type of accusation against him. I also heard an attorney indicate that after watching the Tucker Carlson interview with Matt Gaetz, Tucker Carlson was made a witness after that. So we'll see if that happens.
Georgia on my mind. It is, it's not the only bill. There's other bills passing. Of course, the Democrats are very cleverly attacking it on what I think is probably one of the more insignificant points, but pointing to how ridiculous it is, and that's the prohibition, which would make it a crime to bring food and water to people in line. I mean, it is just absolutely blatant that this is aimed at, at Black voters. Cancellation, we've talked about on previous shows, cancellation of voting on Sundays when Black churches really mobilize a lot of their votes, shortening the time for early voting, making it so that, that every county has to have the same amount of time, regardless. And I can understand that, but they've shortened it considerably. And I mean, other things. And Biden has called it Jim Crow. Yep. Republicans are accusing the Democrats of playing the race card. But right now, the voter protection law that's going through the House, we talked about last week, going through the Senate, I think it's already passed in the House, is very popular. I think another one of those things that's in the 70% when it's read to them, because it's obvious, and including anti-gerrymandering maneuvers. And it is, and Senator Warnock has said it needs to pass. We cannot let the filibuster, we cannot let a Jim Crow process defeat a bill entitled to overturn Jim Crow. You're going to hear Jim Crow a lot. People are going to learn all about Jim Crow. There are probably a lot of kids today saying, "Who was Jim Crow?" It probably is being Googled a lot. But it has generated a reaction. Corporations are now starting to actually respond. Coca-Cola, which does a lot of business in Georgia, is saying, they're not happy with the law. Celebrities, they're talking about pulling movies out. I mean, in Georgia is looking like not typically Southern racist, but also spoil sports, because it comes right on the heels of a big loss in Georgia, in both the presidential and in both Senate elections.
Yeah. Well, and earlier today, and this may have happened yesterday, but I read about it today, the governor of Georgia, Brian Kemp, who signed this into law, it was, by the way, passed through the legislature and signed by the governor in one day.
Right.
And of course, the big lie, the whole voter fraud was the reason for this, right? Well, the governor of Georgia is now, there's a tape that's been released with him saying this doesn't have anything to do with voter fraud, meaning that this has everything to do with the fact that Republicans in Georgia are shrinking in numbers, and going forward, they're not going to be able to win. So it's not about voter fraud. It's about retaining power for wealthy Republicans. And so that's what it is. And that's the meaning of what Governor Kemp said on tape, probably not knowing a microphone was on. So, yeah, and I have a prediction about this coming up a little bit later. But yeah, I think that you're going to see a lot of pressure on companies in Georgia, especially the ones that are headquartered in Georgia. You know, these companies are going to not want to be hit with all kinds of boycotts all over the country, potentially all over the world. Right. So this is going to come to a head somehow in the state of Georgia. And I don't know exactly how. I'll tell you one other thing that's going to happen with this. The more this gets pushed and talked about, the more it's going to energize people like Stacey Abrams and organizers in the state of Georgia. Yes. And if they thought turnout on the left was big in November of 2020, they have seen nothing yet. Because when you start talking about taking away a person's right to vote, people hear that and they are going to mobilize. So I have a feeling that Republicans are going to look back and think that this was a big, big mistake.
Maybe, although, you know, I think with the Republicans, the reason the Republicans jammed it through so quickly is so they're hoping that maybe by the time 2022 comes around, if the economy's better and people are feeling somewhat complacent, that they won't be as angry as they are now, particularly African-American voters. But I don't think that's going to work. Democrats have mobilized around this the same way the Republicans are trying to hit Biden on immigration. They're trying to make that the national issue besides the pandemic. The Democrats are trying to hit on this and make Jim Crow and suppression of the vote, especially the black vote, the national issue.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, time for predictions. I've got a couple, but Chuck, I'll let you go first.
Well, I have two quick ones. And first, just following up on the Georgia thing there, I think what I've been reading indicates that especially Delta Airlines, which is headquartered in Atlanta, Delta Airlines headquartered in Atlanta, I think the CEO is now very, very worried about this voting law and thinks that he and his board need to speak out against it. So I'm betting that you're going to be seeing not just the executives at Delta speak out against it. I'm betting that you're going to be seeing commercials on television and online and, you know, all over like Facebook and Instagram and everywhere with Delta Airlines being very clear that they're opposed to this. So we'll see. The second thing is the latest thing from Trump world is that now he's going to be reinstalled as president in August. Where does that come from? It comes from the My Pillow guy. So my prediction is that Trump will not be installed as president in August, and the My Pillow guy will have one more strike against him.
All right. Well, I've got two very quick predictions. One is I think Officer Chauvin will be convicted of second-degree murder. Second-degree murder. I don't think they'll get first, but I do believe that he will be convicted of second-degree murder based on, and I'll go into it more in a future show. Secondly, I think Matt Gaetz will be out of Congress by the end of May, if not by the end of April. I think they're going to push him to drop out, and he will not get a job with Newsmax. Besides which, Newsmax may not even be in existence in another couple of years after the Dominion lawsuits are finished with them. We did not talk about the $1.6 billion lawsuit against Fox. I think Fox will survive it. They're going to take hits, but I think OAN and Newsmax are in a lot of trouble, and I don't think they're going to want to take on Matt Gaetz. So those are my points.
I agree.
All right. That concludes this episode. We will be back next week. I want to thank Matt Knight for engineering and allowing us to present on Access Humboldt. You can watch us on television channel 12 Access. You can hear us on the radio 96.7 at the times designated. And if you have anything you want us to talk about or want to comment, please email us at redwoodwonk@gmail.com, and we will answer any questions that you have or possibly address issues if they are topical when the episodes come up. Until next time, keep thinking.